Tonight we're going to have the amazing and wonderful Joey Robichaux. I'm waiting for him to pop on and send me the request to be part of the show, and I believe he just popped on. Now I'm waiting for his request so he can talk to us about the nuances of various decks and why it's important. We're going to be looking at a few of the common foundational decks. And yeah, it should be really good. So if you guys have questions, he's a wealth of knowledge and information. So let's see, I think he's wanting to come in. So I accepted his request to be part of the show. And now we wait for it to
Hey, I'm here.
And there you are. Yay, it worked.
Please. I'm so glad you said send a request because I'd forgotten all about that. I'm sitting here waiting. What do I do now? What do I do?
Excellent. Well, so you're going to tell us about what various decks tonight. Which ones are we going to be talking about?
Well, we're going to be looking at the three main types. We're going to be looking at Marseille, Rider-Waite Smith, and Thoth as well, and some of the variants and how they came about, kind of.
Excellent. Well, are you ready to begin? People will be popping in, and they'll be able to ask questions. They'll type them into the comment bar, and so I'll alert you whenever there's a question in case you don't see it.
Okay.
And so
sounds
you can
great.
answer those.
If I can. If I don't see a question, would you holler and let me know that it hit there, and I will try to address it.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let me go ahead and start talking about just decks in general. If you read histories of tarot, you're going to see a lot of people ascribing divinatory or occult meaning to the very, very beginning. And really kind of that nobody really knows what it came about, but I'm pretty assured that tarot decks did not come into being as divinatory, fully to get meanings from. They basically started off as playing.
So, Joey?
Yes.
It seems that your connection is a little slow. There's a lot of lag. I don't know if that's something that you can fix at all.
I am on wireless. If I'm on to make sure I'm on the 5, that mess.
I'm sorry? Okay, you're checking to see?
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to have to get out of this to make sure I'm on the 5G, okay?
Okay, all right. So we'll be talking about several different decks and learning if those are, just little bits about them. Joey and I work together at Sherwood Forest Fair. He is the owner of the booth that I work at and have worked at for like the last 7 or 8 years. I don't really know, but is it on Wi-Fi?
It's a good thing I checked because I was not on my 5G. It was on plain old telephone Wi-Fi. So yeah, we should have much better connection now.
Excellent. All right. Well, what were you saying about the decks? You were saying the Marseille, the Thoth,
we're going to look at
and Rider-Waite. I'm sorry?
That is correct. Now I'm getting some lag too as well, so we'll just try to deal with it best we can. If I'm talking too fast, let me know, please, because I tend to start racing along once I start. Okay. So I basically was saying that tarot decks really came into play as playing card decks. In the 1300s, playing cards became very popular in Europe. They probably came from China, passed through India as well, but only as playing cards. Now, at the time, they were pretty well set of having 12, 13 cards per suit, having 4 suits, having 10 pip cards, meaning ace through 10, and then a number of 2 or 3, sometimes 4 face cards. The game of tarot is very, very popular. There's actually a card game called Tarot that's still played a lot in Europe. We don't play it much over here. It's kind of a screwy game. I mean, you follow suits just like any other card game you might play. And trumps are actually trumps. Your major arcana are the trump cards. And each one has a different number of points, and it's not like consecutive. It's a screwy arrangement of who has more points and when you can play trumps. But it's a very popular game, and there are parts of France where they really play it a lot today. So let's go back a little bit. Where did the trumps come from? Playing cards are very popular in the 1300s. Many people in Europe that played a game of cards. It was normally a suit following game, much like bridge or spades or hearts or something like that. Actually, the church at the time was not that crazy about it, not because it had any arcane significance, but because it kind of inspired people to gamble by playing cards. So the church didn't like that very much. So much for that. Anyway, in mid 1300s, the Count of, or the Viscount rather, of Milan, the Duke of Milan, wanted to sponsor a special addition to the playing cards. Whoops, and I just bounced out. Okay, so he commissioned a person to draw a special set of cards, not to go with the four suits, but a special separate set of cards that would go along with that. And those are the trumps that he inspired. Actually, at the time, he called them triumphs. They were kind of inspired by the triumphs of ancient Rome, where they'd march through the city after they had won a battle or something. And if we looked at some of those, and we're going to look at a couple of them a little bit later, they're pretty rough. I mean, at that time, they really didn't have a good wood printing or block printing or anything like that. You can see these are really pretty effective hand-drawn cards, although they do look kind of rough. The trumps at that point became part of the tarot deck. And it kind of stayed that way as a card game until the 1700s or so, particularly in France, when a wave of mysticism had taken over the country, and there were spiritual groups and mysticist groups that formed, and people really dug into this type of thing. There were certain people who took the tarot deck, who were now 78 cards, 56 regular cards, regular playing cards, plus 22 trumps, and figured ways or devised ways to use this for divinations, to tell futures and fortunes, and as we all know with tarot, to look for perspectives and different ways we can approach issues. The first deck of these, and there were a couple that came about, but the first one that was really popular is the Marseille Deck, which makes sense. It was coming out of France. And let's see if I can take a quick peek at this of a Marseille Deck. I'm going to try to change around my screen a little bit, and we kind of see this, and I'm going to get a better view of this in a second. And I've got this little bouncy thing that my camera is on, so please forgive me as it bounces up and down as I go through these things. But here's a sample of the Marseille deck. Now, at this time, the trumps were considered just preeminent. In fact, many didn't really use the pip cards, meaning ace through 10, as any significant meaning. It was the trumps that had special meanings. And in fact, even today, there are many decks that are trumps only, that don't really pay any attention to the pip cards. So I don't know if you can see this well. Let me scroll this down a little bit, and maybe I can resize the screen, or maybe I shouldn't resize the screen. Let's see what goes on. But you really kind of antiquing.
It's very blurry, I'm afraid.
Block printed. Is it a little blurry? Let me see. Can I?
Yeah, maybe you can bigger? Tap your screen.
Yeah, let me see what I can do
here. And tap your screen so that it focuses better, perhaps. Tap the screen of your...
Is that better?
What about tapping the screen of your phone to see if it focuses in better?
Nah, that's about all it's going to get.
Okay.
Actually, it may be blurry because this is a very blurry looking deck. It's very roughly printed and everything. We're going to look at some in a second that have much printed much more effectively. Okay.
Okay.
But looking at this, real thing I wanted to point out is that we have some rough images of trumps. And here's we just have pip counts on the pip card. So this would be a 6 of cups here. And we have an ace of coins or ace of pentacles, ace of discs, whichever was the convention at the time, along with that. So, I see your cat there. Very good. Um, so this is what the Marseilles is like. It's very rough, very primitive. Let's take a peek at something that came along a little after that, Jean Noblet. And you can see this one is printed a little more quality. But you can kind of tell it's the same images, the same trumps we have here. The names are in French. This came from a French deck, so they kind of follow that convention. And again, the pip counts are just pip counts. Okay, so for a long time, this was a tarot deck. 22 images of trumps, and then pip counts for the pip cards. Now, let me take a quick peek here at the Visconti deck. This is the one that the Duke of Milan commissioned. And this is a real rough, hard to look picture. And they actually don't have a complete deck still in existence. There are individual cards that are kept in a museum, and there's one collector who has, I think, about 13 of the cards for himself. But these are actually trumps. We have the Emperor and the Empress right there. They're roughly painted. They're hand painted. And there weren't very many of these decks around. They were very expensive. And the Duke of Milan mainly gave them out to his friends and his wife's friends and such. But this inspired the later on Marseille deck to follow the convention of trumps and pip cards. Okay, that was the convention of tarot cards, geez, for the next 150 years, mid 1700s to the early 1900s. We had trump cards and pip cards, pip counts. Okay, and that was the main convention. That's what everybody saw until the early 1900s, when author Edward Waite decided to create a deck on his own. He was a member of a group of people called the Golden Dawn, and he decided, well, I'm gonna beef up these tarot cards and come up with my own set of them. Curiously, he really didn't. He really didn't end up doing that. He ended up creating or commissioning someone to draw the trumps, but he could care less about the pip counts. He commissioned a lady named Pamela Colin Smith to accomplish this, to do this for him. Now, if you ever read old fairy tales, you know, where they might have some illustrations in there with the fairy tales, you've probably seen some of Pamela Colin Smith's work. She's also known as Pixie Smith. So Pixie Smith was well known as being an illustrator for children's books. And if we look at some of the things that she did in the trumps, you can kind of recognize some of the artwork. Here's the deal. So Arthur Waite described to Pixie Smith what he wanted to draw for the trumps. And again, he said, just make up something for the pip cards. And so she did. What she did, instead of doing a pip count, she kind of said, well, you know what? We have these illustrations on the trumps that suggest some meaningful action, some meaningful thing. I'm going to do the same thing on the pip counts. So for every one of the pip cards, she drew a scene, a vignette that kind of inspired people, that people related to. And let's take a look at a couple of things that she did. Now, again, this is in the early 1900s. Now, an original Rider-Waite Smith deck, which, by the way, is often called a Rider-Waite deck, and it's only in the recent, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years that people have started calling it the Pamela Collins or the Rider-Waite Smith deck in honor of Pixie Smith. Waite obviously comes from author A.E. Waite, who commissioned the deck. Rider was the publisher of the deck at the time, so what they have to do with it, I don't know. It technically should be the Waite Smith deck, but we now call it the Rider-Waite Smith deck or the RWS deck to Pixie Smith, because she really made this deck. And you can kind of see she's following the basic guidelines for the trumps, although they're much better drawn. They are much clearer to see when they're printed. And actually, there are several versions of the Rider-Waite Smith deck out there that are in different colors. These colors are a little faded because that's what she had available at the time. There are much richer colors available right now. But I want to look at one particular card down here. I'm going to have to move my machine a little bit. And so we have a pip count. We have the Six of Pentacles. And we actually see a scene on that Six of Pentacles. And so this scene is meaningful to people. In this case, it suggests what you might expect from a Six of Pentacles. You know, I always find this one of the most interesting cards because I always feel it has two different meanings, totally separate meanings at the same time. Do you identify with the man who is giving out alms to the poor people? Or do you identify with the people who are receiving the alms from the richer person. You know, the rich man may be thinking, what a swell guy I am. I feel good to be helping others. The poor people may be saying, well, it's not fair that he has all this and he should do more. So it's kind of a difficult card to read, and you really have to take it in perspective in the layout that you have. I'm going to look at another card, pip card. This is the 9 of Cups right here. On the older Marseille deck, it would just be 9 cups, you know, drawn on the card. Here we have 9 cups with a very fat and happy man sitting in front of it, maybe a rich merchant. I call this a fat and happy card. So this has its own suggested meaning. It suggests that the person takes some pleasure from being in this particular spot, which you really don't get from just looking at the pip count. So I think this added a whole new level of meaning to the tarot deck. Interesting enough, Pixie Smith did not always follow Arthur E. Waite's guidelines, and he did not always check on it very much. If you look at his description of the Ace of Cups, it describes a cup that's being held and it's overflowing and 4 streams of water are pouring out of it. But if you look at the card that she drew, there are actually 5 streams of water that are pouring out of it. So she did things her own way. She was a very unique individual and is much appreciated. And in fact, finally, Stuart Kaplan, who is well known for publishing tarot decks, recently published a huge, extensive book about Pixie Smith. So I actually have it. I haven't read it all yet, but I've looked at some of the pictures just because I enjoy her artwork so much. Now, the Rider-Waite deck really I'm still calling it Rider-Waite. It's really Rider-Waite Smith. That's just force of habit from calling it Rider-Waite's for so long. But it really inspired people to make use of those pip counts and do different things with it, to enhance them, to draw them better. Here's one that I really like. This is one of my favorite decks, the Robin Wood deck. And it's probably the most popular Rider-Waite Smith clone deck that's out there. And we talk about clone decks. The Marseille deck has a number of different clone decks, which are basically just different versions of the same deck, drawn differently, printed differently. Rider-Waite Smith is the same thing. There are many different versions. In fact, probably more different versions of Rider-Waite than any other deck. But if you look down here, let's take a look at a pip count card. And we have the 3 of Wands. 3 of Wands is about realistic expectations. We have somebody who's looking out over the bay, waiting for his ships to come in. Why is he waiting for his ships to come in? This inspires a whole new level of thought that we didn't really have just by looking at pip counts. So the Robin Wood is a very, very popular deck. By the way, she drew it in pencils, Prismacolors, and you can kind of tell by looking at it. She has since come down with fibromyalgia and cannot hold a pencil anymore. So she's taught herself to do computer art, and she still does incredibly wonderful things with the computer nowadays, computer and a mouse. I want to look at a couple of other Rider-Waite Smith decks just to show you some of the variances. This is a Hanson Roberts deck. Now, I keep this one at the booth where we do readings. This one is very friendly for kids. Okay, there are not very many scary scenes. There's not a lot of nudity in. In fact, there's no nudity in. Well, I say that. I see the star there, but no, she's okay. She's covered pretty well. And you can see the 2 of Cups there. It's a very peaceful, very engaging scene to a young person. So this is a wonderful deck to use if you are reading for younger people. Just look at a couple of others. Here's a very recent one, a Wildwood deck, which is just really, it's pretty wild, actually. One of our guys in our booth has recently started using this. Let me try to arrange this a little better.
That's actually the deck that I used the first couple of years that I worked at Woodsong. Yeah.
The images are so beautiful. And
they're very rich.
Yeah, they're very rich images. There's a lot of symbolism there. And you can, again, see the pip cards down here, the six of Swords.
My one criticism of that deck is that at the bottom of each one, it gives one word that's supposed to sum up each card. And as we know, each card has a wealth of possibilities. So to use one word can be misleading.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, I don't know if you can see this here, but on the 6 of Swords, 6 of Arrows, it says transition. 10 of Bows or 10 of Wands, responsibility. Okay. Yeah, kind of. But it just depends on what else happening in there. So this might be a good one for someone who is not well versed in tarot to use, because it does give you some hints and such like that. But I agree with you. That's kind of a bone I pick. But I love the colors it has in there. Now, from there, if you think about a Rider-Waite, each individual pip card is suggesting some vignette or some scene that brings something to mind. There's a Shakespearean deck, which uses quotes from Shakespeare to describe various things. And I'm going to try to read them because my font is too small here. But this is also a very, very meaningful deck. There's a wonderful book. I just knocked this down. Let's see if it stays up. There's a wonderful book that goes along with this that is really kind of interesting if you're a Shakespeare person. I'm just going to try to hold it with my hand to keep it steady a little bit. That explores the plays a lot and explores what's going on in the plays at the scenes, times when these particular scenes are taken from. And they tell you the play that it's coming from as well. You know, from that, there are other people who followed kind of the same thing. This is a fairy deck. But again, there's fairy lore or something on each individual card that suggests something. Okay. Again, this is very meaningful to some people, to others not so much. Did you have something?
Yeah, I like the way. Oh yeah, and Dylan says hello. He just popped in.
Oh, okay.
But I love the way that it takes each of the suits and connects them with the appropriate season.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a nice approach they took. Now, one thing I find with a lot of these various decks, even if you don't end up using them, it's very meaningful to look at them, to understand them, and look at the way they approach things. And it gives you a deeper understanding and a deeper feeling for the type of deck that you may use, different ways to interpret things, different ways to see things. Now, there's also a bunch of really silly decks based on Rider-Waite. There's a baseball deck. There's a Lord of the Rings deck. There's a cat deck. I'm going to take a quick peek at the cat deck. This one isn't quite as silly, but it's kind of funny when you look at them if you have cats. So you kind of see what's going on. One of my favorite ones, and I could not find an image of it. I have the deck, but okay, here's a good one here. We have basically 5 of swords here, and it's contention. It's 2 cats, and they're about to get into a tussle about what's going on there in their particular lives. But one of the favorite things I've seen from a cat deck is one of the trumps. Not the trumps, I'm sorry, the tower card. The tower card is a vacuum cleaner with a bunch of cats running away from it. So I thought that was very appropriate.
That's funny. I like the way Temperance is the bowl with the fish inside of it and the cat just sitting expectantly.
Oh, exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Being tempted for sure. Okay. So those are really, those two, the Marseille and the Rider-Waite Smith decks, I would think are the ones that are most often used just as tarot decks. Okay, Rider-Waite Smith is very easy to use because the symbology in the pip cards are so meaningful. Everybody can relate to them. Marseilles are for people who are more versed on the old ways. Then there's the Thoth deck. Okay.
I love the Thoth deck.
You know, the thing about Thoth, and it's a wonderful deck. It's very deep, and you know you're dealing with the big boys when you're playing with Thoth, because it's not just, oh, we're looking at the images and we're thinking of pips. And no, everything else comes into play: astrology and numerology and the Kabbalah and such like that. And people who are well versed in all of those things can really do a lot of neat stuff with the Thoth deck. Now, Thoth, the imagery, the artwork on a Thoth deck is incredible. I mean, it doesn't look like something you might expect from this. Thoth was developed, what, in the 1930s, 1940s, somewhere around that era. It's not what you would expect from that era. I mean, I would expect to see this on a modern album cover or something like that. But very symbolic, very meaningful. The pip cards are very symbolic as well. So you really have to understand other things than tarot to be able to use a Thoth deck effectively. But if you do, it's a tremendous deck for those type of people who have that deeper understanding. Now, there are a few Thoth clones. Thoth is very difficult to clone effectively, so you don't see a lot of them. Here's probably one of the more popular ones, and I don't know if you can see that. It's the Handle deck, and the pip counts again are really screwy here, just like the Thoth deck. But it's very symbolic imagery, and you really have to use other tools than just tarot to use them effectively. You need to use in fact, I'm just noticing up here we have some Hebrew characters up at the top, and it actually looks like some runes. Yep, Nordic runes up at the top as well.
Oh.
So we've got Nordic runes, we've got Hebrew characters as well, plus the numerology, plus the astrology, and so on. So Handle can be very, very deep if you have access to those particular tools. I just want to look at one particular deck card from a Handle deck, and I've got to go to a different website to get this one. And this is the Four of Cups. So it's still a pip count, but we've got other imagery on the card. We have a thing down at the bottom that says mixed happiness. So we have a meaning of the card on the well as well printed on it. So this can be helpful to people as well. Now, I'm not going to show them, but there are other cards used in divination. Tarot is very, very popular, but there are things like the Lenormand Deck, which it's 36 cards, and each card is actually it's much simpler to use if you're not into tarot or just the beginning. A Lenormand, 36 cards. Each card has a single image on it, so it might have a tree, or it might have a child, or it might have a fox or something like that. So it's kind of easier to understand what's going on in each one if you think of what does that symbol mean to you? What does it suggest? There are also other fancy. There's a Minchiat deck, which is basically a tarot deck with an astrology deck tacked onto it. Okay.
And what is it called?
It's a Minchiat.
Oh, I'm not familiar.
Ate. Now it's curious. Minchiat basically means foolishness in the particular language that it's coming from. In fact, the word tarot, people fight over what does the word tarot mean, and they're trying to assign an esoteric meaning to it. It basically meant, hey, fool around. It was a game. It came from an Italian word that meant, hey, we're playing a game. Okay. So again, tarot started off very, very innocently, but lent itself very well to be extended into a more arcane or esoteric avenue. There are other decks that you might see that are, there are some fairy decks. They call them fairy decks, not necessarily fairy tarot, but fairy decks just in the meaning that these don't really follow the basic tarot meanings, but they're also useful when used for esoteric methods by various people who understand what's going on there. And so that's kind of where I ended up at. We have three basic types of decks. There's a Marseille, which has trumps and pip cards. We have the Rider-Waite Smith, which has trumps and then illustrated very meaningful pip cards. And then we have the Thoth deck, which is an incredible deck if you are into Kabbalah and astrology and runes and things like that, numerology. If you are, you can get a lot of use out of it. Go ahead.
Dylan was wondering if you've ever heard of the patch tarot.
I have not, no.
I have not either. Does it have any peculiarities, Dylan, or are there any aspects to it that are especially interesting? Feel free to type that into the comments for us.
Yeah. Does it follow one of the three, Marseille, Rider-Waite Smith, or Thoth?
So I've used an actual deck of bicycle playing cards when I haven't had a tarot deck present. What is the history of using a playing card deck?
Yep. When people talk about old gypsy fortune tellers, actually the gypsies still use regular playing cards. Now remember that the whole history of tarot decks in general began with playing cards. That's what they were used for, and gypsies never really stopped. If you had a reading from a modern gypsy today, they would probably use a regular deck of playing cards. I want to say that Buckland also has what he calls a gypsy deck, which is basically regular playing cards. Now, the suits are kind of funny. It depends on what nationality you're dealing with. The basic concept of something meaning hearts or cups, something meaning spades, something meaning clubs, something meaning coins or discs, depends on what country you're in. Some country like the European or the English method does follow hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs. If you get into other countries, you might not see a club anymore. It may be an acorn, or it may be an actual, you know, wand or a club or something like that. It just depends what was the convention in that particular locality that became popular. And I still don't see anything from Dylan, so.
Yeah, he hasn't typed up anything about the patch tarot yet. Maybe he's in the midst of working that up. Oh, he says there are extra major arcanas. It is created by spirit science. It's definitely an interesting one. What is spirit science? I do not know that.
I'm not aware of that either, but I can see where that might come from. The trumps, Carl Jung basically said the trunks represent archetypes. An archetype is a basic primal fact that everybody feels inside. It might be something like a father or a mother or a child or some basic thing, death, something very basic like that everybody relates to. Whereas the other tarot cards, the minor arcana, you know, we have pip counts, we have that mean various things, but they're not as basic, not as primal. Whenever I see a lot of trump cards in a reading, I always pound my fist on the table and say, pay attention, this is important, you got to listen to this. So I can see that if you took a regular deck and enhanced it with additional trump cards, it could end up being meaningful as well. It could be challenging to find out more archetypes to fit in there, but they do exist. You can make that happen. That's an interesting thing in the fact that tarot is very fluid. It's very changeable. It has changed a lot over its history, and it will probably continue to change a lot over its history. And that's really, you know, a reflection of the people who use it, how they can use it to inspire themselves, to inspire their perceptions, to inspire their particular readings.
Joey, do you want to flip your camera back around so we can see your beautiful face?
Sure. Okay, I've got to figure that out. Oh, I see it right there. Okay, I'm back here again.
Yeah, I have a couple of decks that actually, I think one of them is called the Prisma Tarot, and it has, it was made in an interesting fashion so that the each suit has a story that when you line them all up, they show. It's like one watercolor piece that goes all the way across in a very Van Gogh style, and then there's and they have an extra trump card, but it's different for each person who ordered it. So I got strawberries, a friend of mine got the fish, and I mean there's a bunch of different like I think there are 4 different possibilities you could have gotten. So I found that to be an interesting convention. And then there was then there's the Fountain Tarot that has an extra trump card called the Fountain, which is has a meaning of deep esoteric learning and wisdom. That's having gained that.
Again, yep, tarot decks can be very. You may remember that Fred, one of the readers who reads with us at Sherwood Forest, for the first many years he used a deck that had 5 suits. The extra one was Spirit. It actually had pip counts, and it didn't work for me. It gave additional insight into things. It offer different ways to look at something.
Interesting.
So
do you know what deck that was? I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out.
And he didn't. Oh, okay. Is that any better?
A bit.
Maybe not.
Yes. Oh, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I don't remember the deck. I asked him that the other day, and he didn't have an answer at the time. You know, and being Fred, okay. he had a comeback instead. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Y'all guys don't. I don't know. Maybe y'all know Fred. He's a crusty, likable curmudgeon, I guess is the way to put it. Nice guy.
Yes,
like Fred.
He is the booth curmudgeon. So we all work at Woodsong Tarot, which we have a Facebook page for Woodsong Tarot, and we do various festivals occasionally, but are always at Sherwood Forest Fair. And Joey, you started that booth. Fred came on shortly after you started, and then I came on shortly after him, I think the year following him. And then we have added people since then, and Dylan, who is on here, is also one of the people that is at the booth. So we just keep growing.
I know it keeps growing. And actually, the other day at fair, we were slammed all day long. We could have added more people, and it would have worked out. People are very receptive to tarot readings, and it's fun to see that, that happen. Yeah, we started at Sherwood with just me sitting under a tree, and it's now grown. We have about 6 or 7 people in a very nice booth, real close to that tree, just in case. But yeah, we enjoy it over there. It's a fun place. In fact, our last weekend is coming up in a couple of days. Fair is closing after that.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the
it's a
season is closing.
final.
Fair's not closing.
Yeah, final weekend is this weekend. I will be happy to have my
Yep.
weekends
Yeah.
back, and at the same time, sad to not be able to get together with all of you because, uh,
I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't
It
really
just
get to
feels
spend
like
much
home away.
time. But
I
you
know.
might,
We all different, but we meet up.
and hopefully you and Dylan will work with me at Scream Hollow this June because I'll be at Scream Hollow every Friday and Saturday in the last 3 weeks of June. So
Okay,
I'm
that
trying to
that
get y'all
that
to
could be
come
very
out.
much fun.
Yep, it
All
is
right.
fun. It'll be busy because since COVID is now we're in stage 2, I think, instead of high alert. Yes. Yes, and Zach is going to help me paint my house. He's also part of the booth. And he's going to
Yep.
come and paint my really tall walls because I'm afraid of heights. And he is at heights because he's a
He's very
tall
tall.
man.
Exactly. Yep.
So, did anyone have any questions about any of the decks or have any questions about tarot? Joey is a wealth of knowledge and information, which is why he's on here, and he knows a lot about the history, which I don't know as much about. That is for certain. But you're schooling us tonight, so that's great. Was there anything else that you wanted to add in to let us know about these decks or about just your work in general? Are you there, Joey?
Yes, I am. I'm look. Do we
Okay.
have what's a good first deck? Um, I would say a good first deck is a first off a Rider-Waite Smith clone, because it's going to give you imagery or something to work with on every single card. Um, Probably the majority of the tarot decks of tarot books out there use the Rider-Waite Smith imagery in describing their cards, their use. Rider-Waite Smith is a good one to start with. However, I think the Robin Wood or the Hanson Roberts is a lot more comfortable, simply because they're newer decks and the artwork's a little better. The books are tremendous. My favorite tarot writer is Rachel Pollack. Uh, she's not for everybody, but she really goes into depth, not exhaustive, tedious depth, but she's gives a good interpretation and a good suggestion about pretty much every card and how to use them, which to me is very important as well. Someone named Joan Bunning, I think, Bunning is the last name. She gives a good has a good book as well. Goes through every card, describes them very well. Not as deep and as heavy as Rachel Pollack does, but it's also very, very well. Probably the most popular tarot writer right now is Mary Greer. She has some very good stuff. I don't always like everything she does, but in general, you're not going to be hurt if you read her books. One of the best things I got from her when I was still trying to figure out, when I was first learning tarot, she said, look, if you're trying to figure out the various cards, particularly the trump cards, sit down, close your eyes, meditate, think about them a little bit, place an image of that card in front of you, put it in your mind, and then have a conversation with it. And the card will tell you what it's about, what it's doing. And that actually worked pretty well for me when I tried doing that. It's kind of scary a little bit because sometimes they told me things hey, pay attention, listen to this. But it worked for me. So she has some nice tips in there. She also has a really good book on how to read reversals. And we haven't talked about reversals at all, but a card may have different meanings depending on whether it's upright or reversed. They may have different meanings depending on how it sits in a reading. So again, tarot is so fluid, so flexible. There's so many ways you can go with it and so many things you can do with it that really does just help your mind grow a little bit. In fact, can I tell a personal story here for a second? This is
Yes,
how I got
please.
into tarot in the first place. Before I retired, I was an IT person, which would mean I'd travel around and I'd work with clients who were having issues with their software. And actually was an international person. I traveled around the world doing this. And what happened is that whenever I went somewhere, I knew that they were having problems and that the local people were not able to solve them. So I couldn't go there and do the normal stuff. I couldn't, chase down the usual suspects. I had to try something totally new, something totally off the wall. And I started using tarot cards to give me different perspectives about how to approach problems. And that's how I got into it. It worked fantastically for me. And that's pretty much how I used it for the first 5 or 10 years before I got into doing readings for people.
Excellent. So I have several questions that came up. I'm trying to scroll back through those. One of them was from Dylan. He wants to know how you feel about artist collective decks.
In general, I don't like them. And I know that some of them are very popular, and I've even participated in a couple of artist collective decks. What I don't like about them is some of the artists always cheat and use collage instead. And I don't like collage decks. I like to see a consistently drawn thing that somebody puts some effort in. And the other thing is I just don't feel the continuity in an artist collective deck. That's just my personal opinion. Other people may really like, because you do get a lot of different perspectives from a collective.
Yeah, I've gotten an artist collective deck off of Etsy at one point when there was an artist I liked who did one of the cards. But yeah, I feel the same way. The continuity, there's not a flow to them. It gets rather disjointed. So then his next question was, what is your favorite spread? Do you have one?
I do have a spread. I have 2 spreads that I use a lot. I have one I use a lot in the booth because it's quick and effective. I have another one that I used to use a lot when I was doing online tarot readings or by mail tarot readings. And basically, if you take the 10 cards in a Celtic cross spread and lay them out in a pyramid instead, so they look kind of like a bowling pin layout when you've done, you now not only have the meanings of individual cards, but you have the relationships between the cards that are right next to them that don't really exist in a Celtic cross. So like I might take the middle card, the present card, but I can look at the cards that are contiguous to it, not only side by side, but at the right angles and up and down, that give me a lot more, things to look at that might suggest what's going on in individual cards. And if you look at them, well, let me just kind of leave it at that. I like to use that particular thing. I don't do it at the booth because it takes a lot of time to do that. Okay. At the booth, I use something that's in a diamond shape. So it's 9 cards, basically. I'll start off with the top card, suggesting the person, the querent. It could be them, something they want to do, something they want to stay away from, something that's meaningful to them. The next cards on either side are things that either hurt or help that particular position. Okay. The next 2 cards on either side are either a challenge a person is going to face or a great asset they have that they can use. The next 2 cards, and now we're winnowing down the diamond again. We're coming down to the point. On the left is things we can do to try to best improve that weakness. How can we best defeat that weakness? On the right-hand side, it would be things we can best do to use to implement that strength. Okay. The bottom is something we'll see along the way. And then when I've laid this out, I've got a diamond shape and there's an empty cross pattern in the middle. Then I'll take the 9th card and put it down on that cross to fill it up. And then that's something they see at the end. And that seems to work for me in the type of, yeah, because it's quick, although I can spend a lot of time on there depending on what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Nice. There was another question on here that was, I'm scrolling back through, any recent profound self-reading experience that you would like to share?
I don't really do self-reading that much. The last time I did one, and this is years and years and years and years ago, I was in New York City in what's the park? Central Park. And I was across the street from John Lennon's apartment. And I went to Strawberry Fields and I did a reading there. And I felt John Lennon talking to me. So I just said, okay, and I'm not going to say what I got out of it, but it was so meaningful internal that I said, okay, that's all I need to do. I'm really good with that. Now, I will occasionally pull one or two cards and say, okay, what do I need to think about today? But that's really the last extensive reading I did for myself.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting as readers, and when we do it so much for other people, I also don't very typically do readings for myself that often. I just don't pull cards. What about you, Dylan? Are you still on here? Do you read often for yourself? Or, I mean, I know that I have pulled some cards for you on occasion. So I don't know. We end up doing how many readings in a weekend? Like
oh golly, yeah,
a lot. It's a very busy booth, and it's I'm thankful because we get to meet some amazing people and have some pretty profound experiences. So that's really cool. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you and get a reading, they could do that perhaps. Oh, Zach says 83 in a day that the booth does, and that's spread across like 5 people, and you know. And a lot of those tend to be combination readings too. So that means we're doing 2 at a time, like palm and tarot, or psychic and runes. Yeah. So Dylan says that he does not like his bias for his own life bleeding into the reading. So he tends to not do readings for himself. And that is one of the areas that we as readers, if we're doing something for ourselves, we have to be mindful of, that our bias can affect how we see the cards and whatnot. So that's, it's good to be that self-aware.
It's a challenge.
So with it, suppose that somebody wanted to contact you and get a reading, if they were to, when I tag you in this IGTV, they can get in touch with you via Instagram, like send you a message on here, and you'd be able to speak with them about that?
Probably so, except that I almost never go to Instagram. Probably going to our Facebook page, the Woodsong Tarot, is that it? That'd probably be the best, most certain way to get there, because I just don't, I'm an old fart, so I don't use Instagram and things like that much.
All right, so I should, I don't know that I can necessarily tag the Woodsong Tarot page, but I'll just say I'll type it out and let people know to find Woodsong Tarot on Facebook and send a message and specifically request you. You are one of, I think the last.
That. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We do have a page. I think, I don't know if it's called Tarot by Woodsong or Woodsong Tarot. I don't remember.
Yes.
But there's one out there.
Yes, and all you would have to do is say, I want a reading from Joey. And I am one of the admins of that page, so I'd make sure that he gets that. And, if you have any more questions, you can always send those to us. Comment at the bottom of the IG Tarot, the IGTV blurb when I put it up there, or on YouTube. People are welcome to also ask questions. Additionally, if anyone is wanting to be part of this show in the future, just send me a direct message here on Instagram, my Instagram being Spider Goddess, and we can talk about that. I really appreciate you taking the time out to school us on the history of tarot and the various decks. It has been great to.
Had a ball. A lot of fun.
And Dylan says that he loves us and he'll see us this weekend. And we love you as well, Mr. Dylan. Mr. Dylan. And so I think that at this point we will log off and enjoy the rest of our evening. And I hope that everyone else does the same. Take care. Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. Y'all take care.